everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Rock Your Shine After You've Been Cracked Wide Open. I think my listeners who have been listening to me for a while know how much I love to bring my psychic mediums on to give us more of a higher perspective, perhaps, than we can actually see in our physical world. So today, I am bringing on Jennifer Sullivan, who I recently got a read from and just loved everything about it and asked her if she would please come on to the show. So welcome, Jennifer. I am just going to introduce you with your bio. Jennifer has experienced the spirit world since childhood. She discovered tarot at the age of 11 and began reading professionally in high school. Jennifer's first career was in the equine industry, where she trained horses, coached riders, and judged horse shows across the globe. Jennifer has retired from training and teaching, but still judges from time to time. Spirit has been guiding Jennifer to step more deeply into using her talents in other ways. She is focusing on making the transition into the spiritual world full time. She describes herself as a psychic, an astrologer, a rescue medium, which means she specializing in souls that are earthbound. I promise we'll get into that. And she is a firewalk facilitator. So, Jen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm so excited too.
This is such a delight. I'm thrilled.
So let's start with, I'm sure my listeners are all over the map, right? Some who believe in mediums and some who do not. So, but first I would like to just put some definition around some of the words that I threw out.
Of course.
So let's talk about your work as a psychic, a tarot reader, a rescue medium, a firewalk facilitator. What does that all mean?
Well, for me, in regards to the psychic work, is I truly believe, first off, that every single person out there has intuition. It's whether we choose to tap into it or not. And on certain levels, some of us really delve into it and some of us don't. So I was always very highly intuitive and decided to develop that. And fortunately, I always kind of trusted those instincts that I had, as well as, kind of heard that voice, so to speak, guiding me in different directions, telling me what would be, good choices, not so good choices, and, what I needed to learn from certain situations that I had experienced. So for me, the psychic is really tapping into that intuition, really allowing myself to be an open channel to spirit, or whatever you would like to label it, as a higher power, so to speak. And really just allowing myself to listen to that guidance. And when people come to me to have a reading, that's part of it, is asking for myself to be a clear channel, but also to allow that individual's spiritual team to help give me messages that I can relate back. So
when did you realize it was a real gift, though? Because you had I know you dabbled in this when you were young with the tarot, but you had a whole huge, very successful career.
I did. And so, interestingly enough, I kiddingly always refer to that movie, The Sixth Sense, is, when the little boy sits there and goes, I see dead people. I actually always saw dead people, and I could actually see them when I was a child. I grew up in an old Victorian house that was built in the 1800s, and I was an only child. There was a spirit in that house. And I kind of figured out at an early age that not everybody could see this spirit, but I could see the spirit, and I had full-blown conversations with the spirit.
Was it a scary spirit? Was it a scary experience?
No, she was actually, her name was Mary Ann Ely, and she was the original owner of the house with her husband. And I could see her with her hair done up in that bun, and she had a high collar dress with, 4 buttons down the side. It was a blue dress. And I would always say, Marianne did this or Marianne did that. And I'm sure my mother must have just thought that I had an imaginary friend or something, like, which would be a very normal response and a very normal assumption that a parent would have. And very typical of, a lot of children having that kind of like imaginary friend, possibly. So, but it wasn't until people actually stopped by our house that were in the Ely family and said, our great grandmother grew up here in this house. She's turning 100 years old. She wants to come back to this house. That's like all she talks about. So my mother said, oh, absolutely, come bring her. So they set up a day. They brought this woman to the house. I was probably about 7 or 8 at the time. And they brought all this incredible information about the home. They had pictures and documentation about when it was originally built and copies of when the land was purchased and throughout this whole family, because this was a really big deal. And there was a picture of a portrait of Mary Ann Ely. And here I am, this little 7-year-old, and I'm looking at all these documents spread all around the dining room table. And nonchalantly, I just pointed and I said, oh, there's Mary Ann. And just like walked away. And I think something clicked in my mother's head, but also my mother was like, I don't think I want to know more about this.
Well, I was going to ask you, sometimes the gift, is generational. So it doesn't sound like your mom had the gift. Did your grandmom have the gift? Does this exist anywhere else in your lineage?
It possibly could. So I actually am adopted, and I was actually adopted when I was 18 months old. So, my mother, just imagine it, my mother, because it was through Catholic Charities, and the adoption process is so different now compared to what it was back then. And so my mother, has been waiting, making phone calls, desperately trying to connect with a child, gets an opportunity to come and visit me, drives to Boston in this, townhouse with the social worker, and meets with me for about an hour, gets to ask my foster parents some questions. I, of course, am like just off doing my thing because I'm like, who is this person? And then the social worker said, do you want this child? Like, you need to make this decision. And my mother was like, okay. And so she said yes. And so within 24 hours, I was in this home. Now, interestingly enough, that was on December 9th. And my parents had moved into the house on Halloween. So they had only been in this house for such a short period of time. They had just moved in. The house was like a total fixer-upper when they purchased it. And so they have this child that they have 24 hours to kind of toddler proof a house, not baby proof, but toddler proof. And I am walking, talking full sentences, have my own little attitude, and come into this home. So, I mean, it's, my mother, I always laugh and say, that must have been a very surreal experience to go from not having a child
To
to
having a
24
toddler.
hours to having a toddler 24 hours later.
Okay, so yeah, that is wild. So that sort of like answers my question. That maybe your bio mom and
Maybe.
bio grandmother might have had the gift. Okay, so now you're seeing a spirit in this house. Talk to us about this evolution, because where I'd like to land is to get to this point where you really accepted your gift and how you help people because I'm sure you have clients that come to you that are
Yes.
grieving. So I want to kind of just follow your
Absolutely.
evolution of how you ended up where you are.
Well, interestingly enough, so as a child, I could see spirits, talk to them, had a lot of conversations with a lot of interesting spirits. Um, Interestingly enough, I never really had any terrifying experiences or really scary ones, but I always knew I could see them. As I got a little older into like my preteen and teenage years, I saw them still, but I didn't always interact with them, but I
And
always knew they were around.
did you tell anyone, or was this a secret that you held?
I told some people, but I was very cautious about who I told. And interestingly enough, there were times where I'd be invited to like sleepovers or something, and I'd be like, yep, I'm not going to go stay at that person's house because to me, the energy wasn't right. But I couldn't actually put that into words at the time because I didn't have that information and I didn't have that knowledge, but I knew intuitively something was off, energetically, and I just knew I wouldn't be comfortable staying in that home. And there were a couple of young friends that I had, and we still talk actually, that I grew up with, and one of them had a ghost in their house as well, and they were very open about it. So I remember going to that house and meeting that ghost and being like, "Oh, that's fine." But it was so interesting, but it was definitely something that I didn't always express. And when I was around 11, I remember taking a ride with my dad and being in some kind of a bookstore and seeing all these tarot decks. We were traveling somewhere and we were probably just poking around locally. And we walked into this interesting bookstore that, had a lot of different knickknacks and whatnot. And I saw this beautiful display of tarot cards and I was just enamored with them. And I remember my father seeing me, just my eyes light up, and he said, "You want one of those, don't you?" And I said, "Yes." I had no idea what they were. I didn't know anything about them, but I just instantly was like, "I need one of these and it needs to come home with me." So my father said, "Well, go ahead and pick one out." So I picked out this deck and I still have it. I don't use it a lot anymore, but it's like very special to me because it was my first deck. And it's called the Enchanted Tarot. It was published, I believe, in 1989 or 1990. And it came with this like really beautiful color guidebook. It was stunning. And the reason why I picked that deck is because the images, the woman that created them, she used all sorts of textiles and then like layered them on top of each other to like create the imagery of the cards. And my mother is a quilt artist. So she was always working with fabric and always sewing. So when I saw these cards that looked to me kind of like quilts, that really kind of sealed the deal. So I brought that deck home and I just remember playing with it every single day and just reading that book for hours and looking at the cards and the guidebook going into all the details about, like what this color meant and what this meant and the artist interpretations and really just like reading that thing front to back, looking at those cards, studying them for countless hours and really loving it. So, and then once my friends started seeing that I did this, it was, can you bring the cards to sleepovers? Can you bring the cards to parties? And I said, okay. And so I started doing that. And then in high school, I actually would take like money for readings. And I was in an all Catholic, all girls school, high school. So then it became
Where
even,
like tarot is not
no, it
a
was like
welcome thing.
the nuns definitely would not have approved if they knew I was doing this. So I would get together and I'd like, read cards for all the girls. And it would be like $5 or, something. It would be like, oh, I'll give you a study guide for this. Like there was like bartering. So I say I became a professional when I was in high school because I started collecting money then. And then as time went on, I just kept doing readings, but my love and my passion for the other half of my life has always been with horses.
Horses. Yeah.
Yes. So with the horses, I was really determined to go into that for a career path. And so I was teaching and training, and then the tarot and whatnot were always kind of on the side. So that was always like a side thing. But the horses were like my love, my obsession, my passion. And that was always so beautiful to me. And I absolutely love them. I mean, horses are such spiritual and intuitive animals. They're really, I mean, all animals are, but there's something really unique about horses and the gifts and the knowledge that they have the ability to share with us if we're open to receiving them. And
do you feel like that your time with the horses helped you to develop your spiritual gifts?
I believe so. I truly do, because it allowed me to connect to nature in a very different way. I, was outside all the time. It didn't matter if it was raining, snowing, hailing. And, if there was hurricanes, we were out there. We were at the farm. We were doing that work. And just being in nature all the time and surrounded by that is so special. I mean, people will tell you that they have some of the most spiritual and just incredible, and regardless of what they believe in or not, they'll, if you ask anybody about like an experience that they had when they were traveling or something, a lot of times, more often than not, people are going to talk about an experience they had in nature on some level, whether it's meeting a person and having a really poignant conversation in nature, or connecting with an animal, or connecting just with land or mountain climbing or whatever. So I think being around those animals and being in nature, like just all the time, was so beautiful.
And I don't think we often think about nature or Mother Nature as it's a living, breathing entity, right? I mean, the life,
Absolutely.
and we walk upon Mother Nature's body. And I call her a she's always speaking to us, right? We get spoken to through nature, through animals, through spirit. And that is why we're always being told, if you want to get in touch with yourself, go spend some time out in nature, take your earbuds out, stop, listen to the messages that are everywhere around us, and the healing that can happen when we take a swim in the ocean or the lake or whatever it is. But you're right, people feel amazing after they've taken a walk or go for a hike or whatever it is one does outside.
Yeah. Even if they just go for a walk with their dog,
That's
or
what I mean. Yes.
yeah, or just spend time throwing the ball to their dog outside, or watching the birds. It's nature in general is so healing on so many levels. And so I really see it as such a blessing and a gift that I was able to spend so much time, even as a young child. The woman that was my first riding instructor, who I still talk with all the time, she's literally like a second mom. She had this program where we would get dropped off and we would clean the stalls and work with the horses, and it was rain or shine. And then as we got older and I was, a preteen and a teenager, it would be like, okay, all summer long, it was you got dropped off at the barn at 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, and you got picked up at like 5 o'clock at night. So we were just there all the time. And I mean, her home was just filled with children and she loved it. And so it was all of us learning to work together you know, dealing with, different personalities and having the animals and being outside. But I mean, we were outside, we were outside all day long. And it was really an amazing experience to have.
That's incredible. Okay, so you've got this amazing experience. You're working with horses. You get into, I do want to hear this story because I feel like somehow it's going to lead into where you are now because you got into judging. You became a pretty well-renowned judge, correct?
I did. There was a time where I was judging about 40 shows a year. And I loved every minute of it. I traveled
I was going to
all
say, you're always on a plane.
I lived out of a suitcase. I rented an apartment because I was like, I don't have time to be in a house. And I just literally, I pretty much left on Wednesdays or Thursdays, came home on Mondays. So I was home for probably a day and a half, 2 days. And I did this for over 10 years and I loved every minute of it. I got to see, so many states. The only two states that I haven't been to in the United States are Hawaii and Alaska. They're definitely on my list, but I've traveled pretty much everywhere in Canada. And, I've gotten to go even to some other places and, but interestingly enough, the year before the pandemic is when I started to slow down just a hair. Instead of taking like 40 to 45 horse shows, I was doing like 30, 35. So in my mind, I was like, I was really slowing down. But, and,
I mean, there are 52 weeks in a year. If you're doing 40 shows a year, you are never home.
Never home. The only time I was ever really home was in like December, January, because even in February, we would have continuing education requirements about every 3 to 5 years, to keep up on different things. And so you have large judges forums. And so in February, typically that's when those would start because they would put them on the off season. So I would still be traveling even in February. And so it was a lot of time, but it was a lot of fun. Like I met amazing people, got to have really incredible experiences, see all sorts of different places, and really have the real honor and privilege of watching incredible horsemen and horsewomen and really see some of the best equine athletes out there of various breeds and disciplines, which was absolutely incredible and such a gift.
So what was going on with the spiritual, Jen? Like did you sort of put like the readings and the tarot and all of that on hold? Were you still doing that on the side? Where was that in this huge career that you had?
For me, it was kind of on the side, but very specific. It was very like people had to seek me out for it. And it was more just for my personal practice. There was a time where I had said, this is my career. This is what I'm doing. I love what I'm doing. And I am not going to really ever do this like professionally full time, like the spiritual stuff. I had kind of made a decision that it was going to be my personal practice. So I would pull cards for myself every single day. I would do a meditation. There are times that I still will do a lot of like chanting with mala beads because it was like very calming and comforting for me. And I would do that a lot. Like I would do that on the planes a lot. Or anytime I have trouble sleeping to this day, I get a mala set out and I start doing a chant. And like within 5-10 minutes, it's like, boom, off to dreamland.
Okay. People are going to ask, what's mala beads?
So the mala beads are considered prayer beads. And they're used more in the Buddhist traditions, and there's all sorts of different mantras. So think of it as like the equivalent of like a rosary.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. So think of it as like a rosary. And then, just like you would say 10 Hail Marys, and then, our fathers and whatnot. There's all sorts of different chants you could do. And there's ones for, prosperity, peace, healing. And so that would be something that people could do. So it would be very similar to someone that says like, oh, I say a rosary every day, or I say a part of a rosary every day. Same kind of process in the sense. And just being very grounding, calming, quiet, just like peaceful time, that quiet time.
It's your prayer time.
Yeah, it's the prayer time. So I would do things like that. So I was very determined that this was my own practice. There were times that I had some really interesting experiences with spirits in hotels. That definitely occurred.
Oh, yeah.
And I would have to say, I need to change my room, because there was one time where I did have one that was just rude. I had a very rude spirit.
What does that mean? What were they doing?
Oh, like I went to go judge for the day, because I'm the person that when I go on vacation, I do the don't clean my room thing. I don't want people in and out of my room.
Me too. I do the same thing.
So I just get a boatload of extra towels and I'm like good to go. I can make my own bed and do all that. So as soon as I went, and this hotel that we were staying at actually was known for being haunted. That was like actually a thing. And as soon as I got there, it was this beautiful, beautiful old hotel down south. And I remember as soon as I walked in the hotel, I thought, yep, there's definitely activity here. And I remember going into my room and thinking, there's one hanging out in the bathroom. And, it was kind of one of those things that I said, you leave me alone, I'll leave you alone. Like, we don't really have to interact, because the spirit didn't really seem that it wanted to interact. And I was fine with that. And I said, you do your thing, I'll do mine. Like, just let me sleep, we'll be good. And let me sleep, shower, and we'll be good. And don't make it look some weird horror movie scene, and I'm fine. And so I remember going to judge and coming back and, just being hot, sticky, sweaty, wanting to change. And I remember my suitcase being completely flipped over and on the floor and everything just all over the place. And I was like, rude, just rude. And so I remember picking everything up and then going to take a shower. And I came out and I heard in the shower, I heard this like thump noise. And I just was like, whatever. Because, you always hear noises in a hotel room. It could be the people next to you. And I come out and the suitcase is knocked over again.
What do you suppose is the purpose? Did they want to get your attention? What were they doing, do you suppose?
I think part of it is an attention thing. And I think sometimes there are different spirits that are, some that are more playful. This one wasn't giving off a playful vibe. This had kind of a
aggressive.
Like a little aggressive, kind of like, I don't really want you here.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of the feeling I was getting when you were talking.
It was like not like in a mean way. Like this wasn't going to turn into some scary movie kind of situation. But this spirit did not want this room occupied by me specifically. Mm-hmm. Maybe it would have been fine with somebody else. Maybe it didn't like that I knew it was there. I don't know. I didn't tap into it because I was like, I don't want to engage with you. So I was like, I am not engaging with you because you're rude. And now I'm pissed off. And because you're dumping my stuff everywhere. I was like, and I've judged for like 14 hours and I'm hot and I'm tired. And so now I have an attitude about it. And so now you have a ghost with an attitude and a human with an attitude, and that's not a good combination. So I now ended up like putting my stuff into my bag. And I remember like walking down specifically to the front desk and saying, I'm in room such and such. And I remember the person looking at me kind of having wide eyes. And I went, oh God. So they know, like, this has happened before. And I said, do you have another room available? And they said, we do. And I said, the resident of the room is very rude and I'm not going to deal with it. And they kind of just nodded and smiled and they said, okay. And they said, yeah, that room definitely is known to have activity.
Interesting.
And they were very lovely about it. But I said, this spirit and I don't jive. And, we are not we are not becoming
You're not
buddies.
you're not compatible.
Yeah, we're not compatible. This is like a swipe left situation, like swipe left, let's move on. And so sure enough, I did go into a different room and it was fine. There was nothing in that room. And I was able to, get some sleep and continue doing what I needed to do.
So
But
what was the turning point for you then? I mean, for you to give up a very lucrative, powerful career, right? I mean,
it's really honestly when COVID happened, when the lockdown happened, I knew it was going to be serious. I know there was a time here in the United States where we kind of weren't taking it seriously. And there was like a lot of memes going around on the internet, like, oh, just wash your hands. And there was a lot going on before it really impacted this country. At that point, I had actually had 15 shows booked for other countries. I was scheduled to go to Japan, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. So I had a lot of shows, Holland. I was like booked. And about 2 days after Christmas, I started getting phone calls, not emails, phone calls about things changing in other countries very rapidly. And even though their news was like we weren't necessarily receiving the news that these other countries were already making.
so you're talking before it hit us in March that you were getting.
Yes. So
Wow.
2019, so December like 28th, 2019, I started receiving phone calls that things were shifting already in other countries. Because at that point, we really only thought it was in China.
Right.
And so we didn't realize. And I actually, but they were like, we're starting to postpone things, or we're not going to have outside judges so that's when I was kind of like, intuitively, I thought, ooh, something is really weird. And this is going to impact like on a much bigger level than I think any of us were really aware of at the time. And I remember just thinking about that in the back of my head, being like, things are going to get real weird real fast. And interestingly enough, I have been attending an astrology class where we meet a couple times a month, the same group of people for, probably 8 or 9 years now. And we had been talking about the astrology of the United States and what was going on. And we all knew something big was going to happen because of certain alignments, but you couldn't tell what it was going to be. There was a lot of speculation out there, but there was no real what it was going to be. Some people were saying it was going to be a war. Some people were saying it was going to be strictly economic. It was a lot of. So, but we all knew there was something coming, but we couldn't have told you specifically when or what it was going to be. So I started getting a lot more free time in my calendar. And then, of course, before March even came, even in February, there were some horse shows that were like, hey, we're on the fence about doing this. But, in February, I traveled. I did some judges' clinics to renew licenses. And so I was bouncing all over planes. No one was wearing masks. I mean, we were bouncing all over the place. I was in conferences and, just like the rest of the world was, and, the rest of the US was doing its normal thing. And then when the lockdown happened, that suddenly my days became real empty real fast. And just like a lot of other people's. And so now suddenly I go
because I'm guessing as a judge, you were independent. You probably got,
yes.
right. You weren't a part of like an organization. You were an independent judge that got paid by the people who were hosting the show or whatever it was.
Exactly. So like we're members of different organizations, which is how we get licensed. However, we get like each individual horse show would contact you and you would get a contract and 1099s and all that kind of stuff. So now I go from having my entire year booked to having nothing. So I have like my entire year's worth of income booked, and now I have $0.
And are you scared at this point?
Oh, I'm terrified. I'm like, I have no, well, at first I was like, oh, it's only going to be this lockdown for 2 weeks and then things are going to go back to normal and we're going to have horse shows again and it's going to be okay.
I'd like to thank BetterHelp for sponsoring this ad. Hey guys, I want to take a minute to offer an opportunity for those of you who've been searching for a mental health therapist and haven't had any luck getting callbacks. I know it's challenging to find help, so I've partnered with BetterHelp. They are the world's largest therapy service, and they are 100% online. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of over 30,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a wide range of issues. To get started, you just answer a few questions about your needs and preferences in therapy. That way, BetterHelp can match you with the right therapist from their network. Then you can talk to your therapist however you feel comfortable, whether it's via text, chat, phone, or video call. You can message a therapist at any time and schedule live sessions when it's convenient for you. If your therapist isn't the right fit for any reason, you can switch to a new therapist at no additional charge. With BetterHelp, you get the same professionalism and quality you'd expect from in-office therapy, but with a therapist who is custom-picked for you. More scheduling flexibility at a more affordable price. Get 10% off right now on your first month at betterhelp.com/rockyourshine. That's betterhelp.com/rockyourshine. Now back to our episode.
And then I'm like, oh, this is definitely going to stick around a little longer. And so I started, in order to like make sure I was not going to like go crazy, the first and the best thing that I did was get out in nature. I went hiking every day. Thankfully, there was a lot of great woods near us. There was a beach that I could get to. And I was out walking and in nature every single day because that was the only way I was going to stay grounded. I was going over to the barn to see my own horse, but there was no kids. Usually the barn has a million kids. There's always a lot of hustle and bustle. And it was just, me, the farm owner, and the other couple of workers. And so we were like really our only social network. But I'm really grateful that we had each other because we were at least interacting with other people compared to some other people that didn't have that ability at all. And their only interactions were maybe through Zoom or social media platforms where, I was at least actually able to physically go out and be with people, be with animals, be in nature. And I think that was when I started really having a shift. And of course, what did I start doing every day? Meditations, more meditations, really diving in, reading spiritual books that I had always wanted to read, but never had the time to read, really sitting there and, just sitting there doing a yoga practice, like things I never had the opportunity and the time to, I started doing. I used to, before the lockdown, I had, my astrology class that I did more for myself. And there was a local place called Angels of Light. And they actually, the woman, Kathy Burke, she had meditations every Monday night. And I would try to go to those meditations whenever I was home. And so, but of course that stopped, but she started doing them on Zoom and whatnot. So I really suddenly had all this time to really dive into things and really sit and think about a lot.
Let me just ask this question because, we always recommend to people who are in deep grief to get into meditation because it really is able to quiet the mind. And a lot of healing can happen during meditative periods, whether you're doing a walking meditation or you're out. I mean, I can imagine you were terrified. You don't know. I mean, maybe you've got money put away. You don't know what's going to happen to your career. Okay, so while you're meditating and out walking in nature, is this, what is this helping to, what's the word I want to use? Is this helping to kind of calm yourself down? Like, I mean, what are you doing with the fear around your life? Right? Because
it was very strange. I was in a very fortunate position that I was able to collect. And,
right, right, of
I
course.
was able to collect, but like, well, but there were other people in the industry that
Yeah,
weren't.
I know. Yeah.
So I was fortunate. And I mean, I was really fortunate in that sense. But the other issue but for me, it was one of those things that I don't know. There was something about being in nature and diving into this reading and like starting to do the yoga practice and incorporating these things into this time frame that honestly gave me such a sense of peace that the worry stopped.
Mm.
And I think too, the fact that, when you're seeing online these videos of people that are in these, high rise apartment buildings that literally can't even get out of their apartment. And there were these beautiful scenes in Italy where everyone was going out onto their balconies and all singing at the same time every day. And these really beautiful things. And I kept thinking to myself, gosh, like how blessed am I to be in a situation where I do have the farm, I do have people that I get to like see every day. I have people in my life that, have had COVID, but they all survived. It wasn't too awful. I myself had it at one point and was okay. And so to really, there was like, and seeing all that on social media was really like, I'm so blessed in the grand scheme of things.
Mm.
And so there was something so grounded and really peaceful. Like it brought so much peace and really like gratitude. And even though there was like initially so much fear and anxiety and, wipe everything down, wear gloves, disinfect your groceries, the whole 9 yards, don't walk into if you go out to get groceries, make sure you bleach your shoes, like the whole 9 yards. And I sat there and really said to myself, like, I'm so grateful in the grand scheme of things. Like there was so much peace and the weather that year was great. Like we were very fortunate. We had a really great spring. There wasn't a lot of rain. I was able to get out every day. And so for me, it really gave me such an appreciation and allowed me to reflect on, the career that I did have and all the traveling I was able to do. And and really sit there and be like, wow, other people never have these experiences. So it really allowed me to like really reflect on things, which was so beautiful when you think about it.
Yeah, I think that, you know, gifts always come for deep tragedies. That's just the way it is, right? And here we are in this global pandemic, and it did a lot for Mother Nature, right? I mean,
Yeah.
when everybody stopped traveling,
Yeah, you saw that the oceans were getting less
pollution,
polluted and
all of the things, and
all
then
sorts of stuff.
a lot of people had, really their own epiphanies around what they wanted to do with their life, and that is certainly what happened to me. And it sounds like that is exactly what happened to you because you did not go back to judging, right?
I did, but not as much. And interestingly enough, during that lockdown time, I had a lot of friends reaching out to me that knew that I did readings. And because everyone's bored, everybody wants something to do. People are stuck in their apartments. They're not as lucky as I was to go outside and run around and do a million things. So they were reaching out to me being like, can I have a reading? And so I thought to myself, oh, I got to learn this Zoom thing really fast. And so, so I got like fairly comfortable with Zoom, and just like the rest of the world did. And, I started doing a lot of readings for people, and that really became fun. And that I realized was like, oh, this does bring me such a sense of joy. And I thought, wow, this is really beautiful. So then at the end of the year, I was able to travel because, in different parts of the country opened back up. And I did judge some horse shows, but there were very few. It was like 4 or 5. And it was like, very small. And we had to wear masks, and it was a whole thing. And trying to judge a horse show in a mask, and the riders had, like the people around, had to wear masks. It was crazy. But so it was great. We all lived it, and we were all, coordinating our masks with our outfits and, doing all that. But the following year, even in 2021, a lot of horse shows were a little nervous because they still weren't sure what was going on. And we were dealing with a lot of the airplane strikes. And so a lot of horse shows were hiring more locally that like judges could drive to versus fly to, just in case, because there was so much kind of gun shyness and kind of like PTSD that, people had in regards to this. So I judged a lot less horse shows and spent a lot more time diving into things for myself, going to a lot of meditations, going in, saying to myself, I want to learn how to work with the crystal sound bowls, and, and really taking this time to really sink into this more. And
are you doing this full time now?
Almost. I'm like 90% there. It's like 90%. And it's kind of a running joke because people are like, are you in or are you out? What are you doing with the horses? And I think some of the horse people, I'm sure, have thought I've completely lost my mind, but it's fine. But and then they're like, oh, you're doing all this new stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I kind of always did it, just you guys never knew about it. And so it was just a really fun time for me to really just like dive in and explore. And so 2021 was more exploring. And then you book about 9 months ahead of time. And so then I start booking for 2022 because now I'm hungry for horse shows. Now I feel like I've got myself all figured out. And I say, oh, I can go back to my life of horse shows. I have such a good balance now. I'm all set. So last year I booked myself solid. I had just bought a house, 2021. I moved into my house. It's my first house. I love it. The yard is magical. I had one of my very best friends was doing the van life thing after COVID. She went and did a van. And so she was hanging out at my house a lot. Like she would go do little trips and then she'd come like, hey, can I park in your driveway? And I'm like, yeah, of course. So 2022, I have myself booked out straight. I have like 30 horse shows back on the books. Because I'm one of those, like, I have to kind of learn the hard way a little bit. Like that's kind of been a thing for me.
Me too.
Yep, like wearing that hat, got that t-shirt and like every color in my closet. So I go back to judging, and every week I'm judging. And by the end of the first month, I have had it. I am miserable. I am angry. I'm disappointed. I have like the lowest vibration that I could possibly have. I'm resentful of myself. But I'm contractually obligated to these horse shows. And, when you're hired, it's because you have a specific licensing. And I have licenses that, like, a lot of times, there's only a handful of judges that have the same exact licensing I have. So sometimes, like, if someone gets sick or injured, if, depending on the show, it can be really tricky to find somebody last minute with that licensing. So I'm like, I've got to fulfill these obligations. So I said to myself, how am I going to make this work for me? And what I did was I found a metaphysical shop everywhere I went. Even if I didn't buy anything, even if it was, I just went to it and sat in the energy and connected that way. It was like the way that it got me through.
And then you did not start booking beyond that. Did you know that 9 months that was it for you?
I think, yeah, I kind of knew. I was like, I knew that was it. And it was really interesting because the epiphany that I had, this is how I got into the firewalk facilitating.
Which you need to tell us what firewalking is.
So the art of firewalking is kind of what it sounds like. It's a process of connecting to the spirit of the fire. The fire is willing to transmute. And so it's a process where you go and attend. When you go and sign up for a firewalk, there's a whole process that you get led through. And you have the ability and the option to walk the hot coals. So the fire burns, the wood burns down. You get to the point where it's a bed of coals, and you have that opportunity to walk through it. And
I
It's
know,
about,
look at me. I'm like,
yeah,
who?
you're like, what? You're crazy. Yeah.
I've seen it. I've watched people walk over the coals and they don't get burned. Has it ever
No.
happened that people have gotten burned?
Yes. I mean, there's always an option. There's an opportunity to get burned. I mean, it is real fire.
Right.
I'm magical. I'm not that magical. I mean, there's
That's what
a,
I mean. Like, how do you not get burned?
well, I mean, it's really amazing what the human body can do. We've seen videos of people lifting cars up when they have their child trapped underneath it. We've witnessed people do really incredible things when their mind is in a certain place. You can watch people in karate tournaments break boards and break spears and really amazing things and break through cylinders of
People
like
hear
concrete.
their people heal their bodies of
And
cancer.
people heal their bodies all the time. And I mean, I tore my ACL. I had a partially torn ACL, and I had to, while I was judging, and I said, I don't have time for surgery. So I wore a brace that was custom done for me. And I went, and when it was finally time to have surgery, I had another MRI and it was healed. And because I had said, I am not going to have surgery on this. And I said that every single day, and it healed itself. And to this day, the doctors are like, I have no idea how that happened.
Yeah.
And I mean, and honestly, I don't either, other than my sheer will, like, was determined to not, have surgery. And so it's really fascinating because I had attended firewalks previously, had fallen in love with it, and thought to myself, I would love to do one of these every year. And I thought this would be a really great opportunity to, like, because it's very purging. It's about taking your personal power back. There's something so freeing and liberating because it's kind of like, what do you not want to carry with you anymore? And the walking those coals can transmute that.
Well, because I was going to say, my friends and I will we'll put intentions out there, we'll put things that we want to let go of and burn it in the fire, right?
Exactly.
It's that release. Where do these firewalks happen? Like if somebody were interested, if we're piquing somebody's interest right now, can they just Google it to see where these firewalks
You
take place?
actually can Google it. There are people that are certified all over, not only just in the US, but all over the world. And for here in New England, there's actually myself and a few other instructors kind of created the group Firewalkers of New England. There is a Facebook group, and we're in the process of putting up a website, which will be firewalkersofnewengland.com.
I'm coming
So
to one of your firewalks.
yes, and so we're in the process. We've had a couple so far and they've been amazing. But so, flashback to, I'm judging every week. I'm angry. I have this beautiful home I'm not even spending any time in. And I finally have a week off. And I go on Facebook and I see the person that I had done firewalking with. His name is Travis Preston of Wolfpack Healing. And he popped up first thing on my feed. And I don't always see his stuff pop up. So I was like, ooh. And he's a very talented healer. And I thought to myself, well, if he's the first one popping up, there's a reason for that, because there always is. And he said, last opportunity for firewalk instruction certification. And I read the little description and I immediately messaged him because I got a hit with myself saying, you need to call him. So I immediately sent him a message and he responded, gosh, within minutes. And I originally said, well, I don't know if I should be doing this right now, because I thought to myself, I'm finally home for a week. Why do I want to leave? And I said, and he called me and he said, well, can I call you? And I said, yes. So he said, well, honestly, he's like, if you're feeling the call now, you should step into it now. And I thought about it. And he also had said to me when he first called, when I first started talking to him, he said, I knew someone was going to call me today. Spirit told me someone was going to call me today. And he goes, I wasn't expecting it to be you. And I said, don't worry, I'm not offended. So, because he's very funny. He's very funny. And so we started laughing. And he said, no, he's like, and he checked in with spirit and he said, no, like if you want to be here, you're meant to be here. And so we went over logistics and stuff like that. And I said, I'm Venmoing you the money. I will see you tomorrow. So sure enough, I got up in the morning and drove myself to New Hampshire. He held this particular training in New Hampshire. And there were 4 other individuals that trained with us. And it was the best week of my life. And that's saying a lot because I've won national titles. I've had clients win national titles and I love all those moments, but this was something that I will never forget. It was so beautiful and so healing and just so incredible.
And going back to listening to the intuition, all of us are given breadcrumbs, and it's being quiet enough to pay attention. That is the gift of meditation. Being quiet enough to pay attention to the nuggets that we're being fed, right?
And then really honoring yourself by following them.
Yes.
Because there are times where you'll know there's a nugget being dropped.
But you don't. Yes.
For whatever
you talk yourself out of it. Your ego comes in. I'm too busy. You could have easily said, I'm not ready for this. I'm finally home. I'll do this another time. But for whatever reason, you decided to listen and you went for it. And there's not a human being on this planet that cannot, in hindsight, say, oh, yeah, I listened to this. I did this. It led to this. Here I am. Right. So I can't even believe that we are now closing on the hour.
I know.
I could sit here and talk to you for 7 hours, but
I know. Same.
I want to bring this full circle in asking you, because now you became a firewalk facilitator.
Yes.
And all of these were steps toward you stepping more fully into these gifts that you have been given on this planet Earth in this lifetime.
Yes.
I want to ask you how you think about, because you've told me that you're not a medium, that you help people who are having difficulty crossing over, help them cross over. How do you work with people who are deeply grieving, though? Do people come to you and thinking that you're a medium? Like, how does your work? Because I actually came to you thinking that you were a medium, and I just got the most amazing reading for you in an entirely different way, an unexpected way.
Yeah.
Talk to me how then, if someone comes to you, because you must get people that come to you and think that you're a medium, right? And want you to connect to their child or their brother or whatever. Tell me how your work helps people who are grieving.
What I will do when someone does make a request in that sense is I will actually explain to them that although I do a form of mediumship, it's not that type of mediumship. And I will actually, explain to them that I deal with kind of the earthbound souls, the ones that haven't crossed over yet. And I will explain to them the difference. And I also thankfully know several mediums that can do that type of work that I would highly, highly, highly recommend. And I will say, like, I am going to give you contacts. I will send you, and I usually reach out to those people and say, I got so-and-so reached out to me. I have recommended you. And so it's kind of like a network in a sense. But I think the key with anyone going through any kind of grief, because even I've been through a lot of grief, losing my father, even losing lots of animals over the years, and even just even part of transitioning out of my old career has been a grieving process for me.
Completely.
And right. So, I mean, grief has so many forms, and it doesn't, and loss has so many forms that it's like, you can't judge somebody on what they're grieving, because grief has so many forms and is such a huge realm. And I find more often than not, then when someone does, reach out to me for that, I just sit and have a conversation with them and just talk to them, listen to them, don't judge them for whatever they're experiencing and wherever they are in their grieving process. It doesn't matter if the person died yesterday, 3 weeks ago,
Or
or
30 years ago.
or 30 years ago. It doesn't matter. And so just having, I think just holding that space and being able to listen is just something that we as humans, and I feel particularly in the United States, just can be better at. Let's just put it that way. And just because sometimes people just need somebody to listen.
Yeah, it's one thing I stress all the time, that we don't have to do anything. Sometimes it's just holding the sacred space of listening. I'm interested though, because I can imagine there are listeners on here that, what if some of the reasons that souls get stuck here, I want
Yes.
you to briefly talk about. And
Yeah.
also, have you ever had a reading with somebody? You know what I'm going to ask. You know exactly where I'm going with this question, right? Where the
Where
soul,
people have come through.
and that
Yes.
are still here and stuck.
I've had that happen. I've also had the instance where I've been doing a reading for where I've been doing readings for people and a message does come through like with a loved one, and it just is a quick hit, but it's not something that I guarantee.
Right,
And
exactly.
it's not something, that's why I would like, if that's the type of reading you specifically want, you want to talk to your grandmother or an aunt or whoever, then I say like, no, that's not the reading to come to me to. And so, but it has come through. And I think the biggest thing, one of my biggest experiences that I have found through my work with souls that are kind of stuck here, I think they can get kind of caught up in things for a couple of reasons. One, there's a mass trauma that occurred.
Murder. Are you
It
talking
could be
murder?
like, yeah, it could be like a murder, even just like maybe it was a huge accident or something. And it's like, it was so,
Something quick and unexpected, right? Where they're trying to catch
yeah.
up with
And like the
themselves.
soul just kind of is like, I don't know what even happened. Like they're so kind of confused. And then there are times too when I've experienced a lot of souls that didn't cross over because I think they were honestly afraid of, like, they were so, especially older souls. And by older, I mean like old souls that have been like hanging out for a really long time. I think part of it is because so for so long there was this like indoctrination process of like, if you're not a good person, you're going to hell. If you do one bad thing, you're going to hell, and so so a lot of souls that I've experienced, I think they were honestly scared that they were going to hell. So they were like, I'm not getting into heaven. I'm going to hell. I don't want to go into this fiery, eternal pit of torture. So they're like, I'm just going to hang out here because this is a safer bet.
And then what do? Help them to understand there is no hell and help them cross over into their own light? Like, what do you do?
Yes. So basically, when I am encountering one that is ready to cross over, you know, I will talk to them a little bit, but then it's really letting spirit take over and saying, like, okay, spirit, show them what they need to see in order to feel comfortable stepping into that light. So there are times where I do get images where I'll see the same thing. A lot of times it's like a private movie that's shown and I have no idea what it is, but then suddenly that soul's like, okay, I'm ready. And then so it's kind of interesting. Or I actually had one fairly recently that was hanging out with me and it just liked me and it wanted to like hang out with me. And I was actually on the phone with my other healer, Valerie Moon Healing, and she's like, Yeah, Jen, this soul, it's not gonna be like, you're not looking for a roommate. You got to tell it to bounce. And 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 I was like, he doesn't want to. And I was like, I've never had one that's wanted to like stick to me. And she said, no, this is ridiculous. So she said, ask why he wants to stick to you. And I said, okay. And then I found out that it was because I reminded him of someone. And so my energy felt comfortable to this soul because of that. And so I said, okay, now I know why. And she actually walked me through this, and she said, you need to say to him, like, you can reconnect with that other person. Like, you don't need to be hanging out with me. Like, you can, if you go into, like, if you cross over, you can actually reconnect with that other person, even if they're still alive. You can like watch over them, you can check in on them, like you can feel their energy. And that's the person you actually want to be like near. You don't want to be hanging out with me. You actually want to be hanging out with them. Like you want to be checking in on them and watching their story and watching their movie, you know? And so once I kind of explained that to this soul, the soul was like, oh, okay. And then he was ready to go.
Wow. That is a cool, cool story. All right, we are actually coming to the
We
top of the
are,
hour. I
yeah.
know, and I got to end with my two favorite questions. We'll
Okay.
have your information in the show notes too for people who would like to contact you and book a reading, which I highly recommend. I adored my reading with you, and I
Thank you.
learned some things. I learned some things that were just so helpful to me, and I want to thank you publicly for that.
Oh, you were such a joy. I could have talked to you all day. It was so fun.
It was
I
so
love
fun.
I love reading people because to me it's like having a conversation. And
That's what it
it's
was. It was a
it's like it's
conversation.
to me it's the opportunity for new connections and friendships. And I also love celebrating other people's wins. So it brings me such joy when someone will just text me randomly like 3 months later and be like, hey, I now have that new job or I got that promotion. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so exciting. And so I love celebrating people's victories because I think there's not enough of that in the world. So I
Well,
just,
and you were a judge,
and
right?
I was a judge. Yeah. And I mean, I was a judge. And so I was like, and so
Always celebrating people's wins.
yeah, I love that. But I also know I wasn't always making everybody happy as a judge either.
Yeah, well, that's part of being a judge.
That's part of it. That was part of the job.
I mean, look at AGT. All right.
Exactly.
Two questions that I like to end with, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Okay.
What does self-love mean to you?
Ooh, that's a great question. Self-love to me means really honoring every single part of yourself and releasing judgment from it. Honoring the good, the bad, the ugly, the crying, the past you that maybe wasn't as wonderful as the newer you is. It's not even about like, yes, you want to be comfortable in your physical body and learn to not hypercritically judge your physical body, but also really loving yourself as a soul and loving the really unique abilities that you have that really nobody else does have.
Nobody else, and it's funny. I was interviewed once, and I said, "Why can't it be enough that we're all an original work of art? There are not two people alike. There are no two people alike. Why can't that understanding just like below your own mind? Because it's amazing, that no two of us are alike. Whatever gifts we bring are ours alone, you know." There's lots of mediums out there, there's lots of psychics out there, but no two are the same. And that's true for
Exactly.
anything that we're doing. That's why we never have to be jealous of each other. We just have to show up and rock our shine,
Yeah.
rock our inner shine. Our soul is looking just to express its wonderful, amazing light, inside of all of us. So I love that. All right. Finish the sentence for me.
Okay.
Hope is.
Eternal.
Oh God, I love that. Hope is eternal.
Yes.
Jen, this turned into a way longer conversation about coaching and around, judging around horses, but this to me was such a fascinating conversation. You're just so delightful. Your energy just makes me almost like I want to say bubbly inside. Like you just have such a gorgeous like energy and spirit about you. And I just want to thank you for sharing it with me and all of my listeners.
Oh,
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
And I halfway attribute that to the multiple Sagittarius placements in my chart because it's always that childlike energy. And also,
My brother who passed was a Sagittarian, and he same thing. He always had that little thing in his eye where it's like, what are you up to? What exactly are you up to next?
and the fact too that I spent a career with so many kids and just because it's like they keep you in that happy childlike zone. And I think
Playfulness.
that's, yeah, it's that playfulness because you know life really, we have to find time to play. We have to.
It's where the magic happens, right? That's where the big epiphanies come. That's where our life expands in that joy
Exactly.
and play. Well,
Exactly.
thank you for sharing your joy with us. And I want to thank all my listeners. And I hope you guys that are out there, those who might be, you know, not not the big believers, that you're going to take something fun at least from our conversation. And for those of you who are believers, give yourself the gift and have a reading with Jen because she's just, well, you can see, you can feel the energy that she brings into the room and into the space. So thank you, everyone. Thanks, you guys, for showing up. I love you. I deeply appreciate your support. And we'll see you guys here next week. Bye for now.